Hello, I'm Luke, and the conversation I want to have with you today is about something that we all share in common. It's something that is inevitable. It's something that maybe we probably don't really want to think too much about, but no matter how hard we try, it's going to be the result for all of us. And that conversation is death. Now, this isn't some weird, morbid conversation to talk about death in the way that we perceive it now, but rather I had a question, and there's a reason for my question. I want to delve in a little deep with this to philosophically look at what our views are on this topic. Now, this isn't just about death. The question that I have for you today is, what could death teach us about life? Now, it seems a little bit of a strange question, and the reason I'm looking at it in the other way rather than going through life to find death, but rather how does death teach us about life? Well, we have so many examples in our world today where we see people who get to the end of their lives who are on their deathbed and who are teaching us some real fundamentals around what really matters in this life. Yet, for so many of us, we kind of look at it as something really sweet, and then we listen to the story and think, I should really take more note of that, and I just get back to what I was doing before. Now, why do I do that? Well, maybe I haven't really grasped the idea of death yet. And could our current perception of death and the way that we see it be almost perpetuating some of the negative behaviors and thoughts that we have around what is to come? Now, this question and this idea comes from a quote that I've read that I'm going to share with you, and we're going to break it down together. And I want to kind of take you on the journey I guess I went through in terms of finding reason for this question, and then I guess how I came to my own, not conclusion, but my current understanding to begin this conversation. So the quote that I'm going to share with you today is from Baha'u'llah. It's from The Hidden Words, and it's quite a well-known quote within the Baha'i faith, which, as many of you know, is my spiritual source. And I'm going to share that with you now, and then we'll break it down and go through it together. O Son of the Supreme, I have made death a messenger of joy to thee. Wherefore dost thou grieve? I made the light to shed on thee its splendor. Why dost thou veil thyself therefrom? Now, for many of you, you're probably going, what is this going on about? Don't freak out. It's, obviously with this type of writing, when it comes to any type of writings by prophets and so on, it's not what we see in our current day language. That's fine, but there's reason to it, and it's really quite specific. So once you start studying the text, you find that the words that are used very specifically, and this is taken a lot into consideration when it's coming to the translation of a lot of text. So the cool part about the text that I find is that part of our job is not to focus on any type of figurehead or state or clergy or anything like that. The faith itself is really driven around understanding the writings. That's the centerpiece of it, is to not look at the prophet itself necessarily and look at other people, but rather focus on the writings and finding the universal truth in that. And as someone who is relatively still new to it, I find this fantastic because it really allows you to be able to break it down and understand it further. So let's break it down together. Let's have a look at this. So, O Son of the Supreme, I've made death a messenger of joy to thee. What a strange thing to say. So here we're saying, I made death a messenger of joy to thee, to you, to I, to the person reading it. So I made death a messenger of joy, which is interesting. How can death, this idea, this notion of death, well, not even notion, this reality, I should say, of death, as a messenger of joy? Wherefore dost thou grieve? So for what reason do you grieve? Wherefore dost thou grieve? Why are you grieving? And it's interesting because it's a powerful statement to say that this reality of death that we all fear, that we all know is coming, that we like to ignore, but is a messenger of joy. And why are we grieving it? The grief, this human emotion that comes to this reality of separation and loss in this human state. I made the light to shed on thee its splendor. So I made the light. Now I've gone through and my understanding of the light is the light of eternity. That's what I've been able to put together. If someone sees it differently, fantastic. But what I've put together from my own interpretation I've made the light of eternity to shed on you its magnificent and splendid appearance. So all of a sudden we've taken, I made the light to shed on thee its splendor, which you can interpret in different ways to see. I made the light of eternity to shed such magnificent and splendid appearance. Why dost thou veil thyself therefrom? So why do you cover? Why do you hide? Why do you kind of shade or remove yourself from this. So such a powerful statement, and actually when you break it down, I'm hoping some people can kind of see the logic behind this. When you start to kind of rationalize it a bit and make sense of it in your own current terms, it's saying that I've made death a messenger of joy. Why do you grieve this? I've made the light of eternity to shed its magnificent and splendid appearance. Why would you want to hide yourself from this? And so all of a sudden we're getting this message which says that death is actually a time of joy. But how can death be a time of joy? How can we find joy in this? And again, relating it back, because I've got the question, is what could death teach us about life? So here we're saying that death should teach us about life. It should teach us because it's a message of joy. Now, to kind of explore this a bit further, because right now you kind of go, okay, well, what do I do with this? You have to kind of delve in a bit to your own belief systems and look at, well, how do I understand death? And what do I see in terms of afterlife? And what does that kind of mean in terms of this life? For me personally, I don't believe in heaven and hell. It's metaphorical. It relates to the current, to our everyday reality in terms of creating a space of heaven or hell. For me, in terms of afterlife, I personally, again, I've gone back to my own spiritual writings. I previously thought maybe reincarnation existed. I very much get into the whole quantum physics sides of things, so I really like understanding the science and trying to understand, as many of these other highly intelligent people around the world are breaking down the understandings of science as we have it today, to see, well, what makes up this reality, and then how can we apply that to some of our spiritual texts to kind of see, well, what coincides with one another. One thing I found is in a lot of the writings, the Baha'i writings, is they speak a lot about different worlds. And so, we have conversations about universe and dimensions, and this is speaking about multiple worlds. And I wonder if this world is one of many worlds, not in that we're coming back for the human cycle every single time, but rather that we are moving through these different stages on our path to God. So exploring this a bit further, it's funny, I came across another set of information from Abdul Baha, who's the son of Baha'u'llah, and he says in order to understand death, we must first understand birth, and has this analogy to sum up to say that could death be the same thing as birth? Interesting, right? And there's reason for this, because again, we're trying to learn what could death teach us about life. So as I start delving back into that, it's a beautiful analogy. I'm going to share it with you now. It's been shared before very briefly in one of my other talks, was looking at birth. So we have an embryo who's brought into the universe of the womb. And when it's in that womb, it has 9 months, a set finite amount of time. And in that time, its job is to build physical faculties. Now, this embryo does not understand why it's doing this. It doesn't know why the arm's growing, why the leg's growing, why its brain's growing while it's developing these functions. It has no concept of this. It certainly doesn't have the developmental capacity for it, but maybe on a soul level, does it understand? I'm not sure. But all it knows is that universe of the womb, and all it knows is that it's building physical faculties. That's what it started probably to figure out over time. But it doesn't know the length of time in which it has, but it thinks that that is it. And then one day, after 9 months, this once embryo, now baby, relatively formed baby, has a death of that universe, if it wanted to look at it in that light, that is. And it goes through the birthing process and it comes out into this universe. Never during that 9-month period did that now baby understand that just a skin layer away was an entire universe with people waiting, rejoicing, celebrating the success and birth of this beautiful soul into this space. So he speaks about it to say, in the same way that we understand the embryo, or can understand the embryo turning into a baby within its own universe of the womb, and within that womb it doesn't understand what's waiting just a skin layer away, could we not apply the same thing to our reality? What if we're misunderstanding death because we're so fixated on the material? We're so fixated on life to death rather than understanding death as potentially rebirth and knowing then what is our purpose in this space. If you could have told the baby that actually you're building these physical faculties because you need it in the next space, would that have given it, if it could have the comprehension to do it, would that have given it more understanding around what it's doing? Could it have then comprehended this universe as it is? Of course not. It could never have done that. But at least if maybe it knew, I really do have to make sure my arms and my legs grow, maybe that would have helped in the process. But all of a sudden it kind of shifted my mindset to go, well, I'm reading this information around different worlds. I'm reading new scientific theories that are coming up with multiple dimensions and how that kind of shifts. And all of a sudden it's coming together where could death actually just be a rebirth? Is it our perception of death that limits our comprehension of what comes next? Is it that we're relying on old information, old thoughts, old theories to make sense of something that is inevitable, that we're never really going to understand? And that's okay, but maybe we can find some solace in our own personal beliefs of that in order to find something more meaningful for the life that we have. So with that in mind, what could death teach us about life? Well, for me, if I know that there's multiple worlds, if I know that in the same way the embryo built the physical faculties to be in this space, and my understanding is that in this space we're building spiritual faculties for the next, for me, death teaches me that life has purpose. We're here to build spiritual faculty. Then I'm seeking, well, how do I do that? Through knowledge, through expansion, through, gaining more understanding of why we're here, how this space is built. How do I serve one another? All of a sudden, this purpose turns into reason. A reason to build knowledge, a reason to wake every single day and to serve one another as souls in this experience in order to know that in the next world, we need that to be able to have our arms and legs of the spiritual realm of whatever this dimension is that we will not comprehend. In the same way the embryo does not comprehend this space, we will not comprehend the next. There's no answer to it. But the answer could be a comfort in knowing that there's purpose and reason within this space. And also that time does matter. Time is finite. It is but a blink of an eye. And it's our job to be able to wake every day and know that we have to use this small amount of time that we have in the eternity, in the shedding the light of eternity on us through death, through understanding that there are more worlds, there's something beyond this space. So we have to use this space for everything that it has, seeking meaning in the reality that surrounds us, seeking knowledge through the information at hand, through making sure every single day we wake and grow our spiritual arms and legs for what is the next universe and the next space that we're moving to. And it's so important to do that. And also for me, just as a personal note, it gives me gratitude, because it gives me such gratitude that if I can kind of slightly, just a little bit understand and comprehend what this purpose of this reality is, of what this life is, knowing the same way that an embryo had such a purpose within the universe of the womb, and that there's something far beyond this. I just have such gratitude for everything that comes across my path. So for me, that's what death teaches me about life. But the question is for you, within your own world, within your own beliefs, your own understandings, and maybe it requires you to delve in deep and open up that toolkit of your own belief system and have a look and think, okay, well, what works for me? What doesn't work for me? How can I explore this further? Seek your own, investigate your own truth within that space, and have a conversation with people around you and explore it a little bit further and ask yourself the same question. What could death teach us about life?